Hello, this is my presentation two um, on focusing on international trade in Module 6. And I'm going to focus on the current themes of production and trade in the U.S. during a global crisis that's happening right now and its relation to international trade. Um, so I think the crisis can readily be applied to this subject. I'm not trying to sensationalize it or anything like that. I think it's a very sensitive subject to people, but I just think it's at this time period we're going through something very unique and original that we may never see in our lifetime, and it's just convenient that the subject material matches up to a lot of what is going on apparently in society right now. So let's get started. Let's look at the foundations of the issue. Coronavirus, called SARS, first detected in the United States on January 20th, a couple months ago, and it spread to at least 312,000 people in the United States. I don't know if that because it's constantly evolving. I don't know if that number is correct right now. That's just from the source that I have in Live Science, and they pull from the Johns Hopkins University and some other statistical websites. But why is this important? That this epidemic is sweeping across the United States? Well, because it has huge implications in trade and international trade in the stage and how we're operating as a country right now, and it's changing trade behavior, trade dynamics, production, localized here, both in our states and nationwide. And we're seeing executive and political controls on all this framework in the United States. Trade and economy will have lasting effects over the long term. I don't purport to know exactly what those effects are going to be in the long term, but I think everybody agrees that we're going to see ramifications for a very long time past this in our economy and internationally. Certain commodities have unexpectedly become very, very critical because this was unexpected and important on a security and a humanitarian level. So, observable trade effects. The United States imports declined with China between January and February. China's trade surplus with the United States for the first 2 months over the year stood at 25.37 billion. Comparison to last year, about the same time, was 42.16 billion. That's a huge difference from Reuters there. In a decline of the trade surplus between China and the United States, and it resulted in a deal for bilateral trade in January that cut U.S. tariffs on Chinese goods. So we cut U.S. tariffs on goods coming in exchange for agreements that China will massively buy more U.S. goods and services. So let's look at some examples of things that have been affected by this, and let's look at tourism. Um, think not in just tangible trade, but effect on goods and services. March 18th presidential order that Canada and the U.S. will close borders to non-essential travel. Um, Furthermore, on CNN, here's an article that travel further illustrates incremental travel restrictions. And the U.S. State Department on March 19th ordered the highest do not travel advisory. So we have no commerce spent on tourism, which supported both an import level from other countries and an export level from U.S. citizens to other international destinations here. We have no free exchange of commerce and wealth in transportation and tourism, severely declined. And I just look at the cruise liners there, and the decline in the tourism and in those. They're going to see those effects for a very long time. So the status quo was support from an import level from other friendly countries and export level of U.S. citizens to travel destinations. And we also see right now sharp declines of FedEx and UPS cargo going to other countries due to bans and less demand. So based on these goods and medical trade with China, the tariffs that we instituted did not include medical supplies and medical goods. Our previous policies are hurting the U.S. now, and we did not foresee that because it could cause potential supply shortages on much needed PPE, personal protection equipment. And we also, in a bigger aspect, we're highly dependent on China for pharmaceuticals. So the application towards the theory that we are studying in political science here, reflecting realism, we are operating more and more like this because of economy, security, and personal welfare at risk. We have more emphasis on relative power. Free market companies versus government command is going on right now. We see government intervening abruptly ways with corporations to control manufacturing and distribution. So the Defense Production Act, you might have seen this a lot in the news. This is something that just keeps coming up in the presidential briefings. And, I had never heard of this, and I didn't know what it was to begin with. But the presidential administration is invoking this quite a bit. And it came from 1950, not 1050, I'm sorry, that is a typo there, in the Korean War. And let's explain what this is. It's an act that gives presidential authority to expedite and expand the supply of resources from the U.S. industrial base to support military, energy, space, and homeland security operations, as seen on that CNN article right there. So it controls and requires and compels corporations to prioritize and support the U.S. So we have this conflict with the international corporation 3M right now. And it's kind of a controversial type issue because on April 2nd, 2020, the White House issued and invoked 3M in the Defense Production Act. It's right there on the whitehouse.gov. It's right there in the front page as a memorandum order. And the conflicting interest, and this is very interesting, is that 3M is a global company. So they're operating under global needs of the free market. So they're trading in a liberalistic fashion all across the globe because they produce one very distinct form of personal protection equipment, which is those respirators, those face masks to people. And they are one of the only distributors that can manufacture these to a high quality level and distribute them. So they were caught prioritizing foreign buyers and refusing, and Florida had a problem where they were trying to obtain these, and 3M was refusing to sell these to the U.S., and they're prioritizing other countries and other people. So there's a few questions here. Who's wrong? What nation's first? And it's a big, giant moral dilemma here. Because everyone in humanity needs supplies, but this creates a nation-first moral dilemma with what's going on here. "3M was operating in global needs and not prioritizing the United States." So the conflict for control of personal protection equipment. Adam Smith proposed the government is to be protecting the economy of the state. In regards to PPE equipment, not only is U.S. in crisis forcing cohesion of manufacturing, but taking in health goods supplied from other countries. So not only are we forcing these companies right now to manufacture to our needs, but we're also taking in imports from other countries. And ironically, at the same time, the Defense Production Act is being used in the fashion of restricting exports of personal protection equipment to other countries. So we are enforcing manufacturing here. We're restricting exports, but we're also taking imports into it. And this is probably as close to America's first approach towards international trade that you can get right now. So the cost of American first approach, and there's a opinion piece on foreignaffairs.com, and it argues that cooperation, foreign aid, and global coordination is integral. And it labels the administration right now as a nearsighted approach. There's a compelling argument as to why the cooperations of foreign aid and global coordination is integral for a long-term solution. And the objective results that are happening right now from this administration are cuts to the World Health Organization by 21%. So we're not funding these humanitarian causes like we did before. We're also funding global health programs by 35% less because of the American First kind of ideology that's going on. And among other things, we cut support to Palestine and UN relief and works agencies. So lastly, let's look at maybe some positive effects of what's going on with this trade and the restrictions and the wartime crisis scenario that's going on. Firstly, we have American innovation. So while we have problems with supply and imports and exports right now and tariffs, people in the United States right now are rising to the occasion and doing things innovative, things that they have never done before. It's very inspiring right now. For instance, while the government is kind of forcing the hand of manufacturers to create stuff for them, there's very independent people that are creating new production techniques. For instance, they're using 3D printing to create these personal protection equipment. And then we have conversion. We have people that are thinking outside the box right now. All these are examples of people thinking outside the box, and they're finding ways to convert old equipment and to get them updated and to use them. For instance, respirators and things like that. And they're technologically repairing them to convert them into equipment now that can be usable, even though they were long overdue for servicing or something like that. We also have people that are adapting equipment to be able to be used more effectively. For instance, these two examples are just resourcefulness. And then we also have people that are in manufacturing that are completely retooling production altogether, and they're making needed products. An example of that are alcohol manufacturers, and they're making hand sanitizers. Or other people that were never in the business of making personal protection items, but maybe they're in the business of making like fabrics or textiles, and now they're making facial masks and hospital supplies now. So maybe the effects continued here of long term. Maybe the United States will become less dependent, and we'll have a more valuable product. Maybe we'll figure out, we'll innovate these things. We'll have a more valuable product to other people, and a production base that we did not have before to exchange with other countries in a more liberal type trade here. And lastly, maybe this frees up other markets so that we can trade those goods more readily and keep the more valuable stuff inside the United States, and we can kind of have more flexibility to tailor our trade to the needs of other people. Thank you very much for your time today. I hope you enjoyed my presentation on international trade and how it is applying to a current international event right now.